I'll let Neil get us going.
Thank you, Ann. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to the webinar. This is an interesting one in that it's kind of a time issue for some people, so we're trying to repeat these a little bit because what we heard early on is they missed one of the first ones we did, and there's not a lot of time for some customers involving the Microsoft transition here. So we're going to be doing these a little more regularly, and hopefully we'll get to everyone and get them the information they're looking for. So let's talk about this. This is one of those events, external events that sort of drives action. And it was quite a surprise, I think, for most enterprise customers to be notified that they had an enterprise application set up involving Microsoft Exchange Online Unified Messaging, and they were given sort of an 11-month time frame to replace that. Basically, Microsoft came back and said, yeah, we don't want to do this anymore. You've got 11 months. We're going to turn this feature off, and you need to go find something else. Well, what this was people who were using a traditional PBX. I like it that Microsoft always calls it a legacy PBX, but just any traditional PBX, even a current model voice over IP system in their enterprise, but had taken advantage of Office 365 for the Exchange Unified Messaging. So they'd actually been able to connect their PBX through SIP services to the Exchange online server. Microsoft decided this was not supportable any longer for whatever reasons, and they basically gave people an 11-month warning that they're going to have to find something else to do. And this started quite a bit of scrambling because although 11 months seems like a long time, in the scale of making an enterprise decision for an infrastructure change, sourcing it, researching it first, hopefully, sourcing it, implementing it, 11 months is just not very much time. So the time frame on this is probably the thing that's got everybody really scrambling. When it comes to things that you have to change in your enterprise like this, we tend to be involved because we've been out here a long time in the unified communications space. So we're going to talk about sort of our piece of this and what we can do. But it shouldn't really be a surprise because while we started as a small 4-port voicemail company 30 years ago, we've been kind of moving upscale into the more interesting world of the enterprise space, and we are now most definitely a player in the enterprise space. Enterprise is very interesting, very complex, and there's a lot going on out there, and every move you make is kind of a multifaceted, multi-departmental decision, and as a result, that's why things don't go very fast. But from our point of view, we are out there with these large enterprises making these changes in the communications infrastructure already. So I guess what I'm just saying is we're pretty experienced in this particular piece of business. We've been at it for a long, long time, and we have a very narrow focus in the sense that this is what we make, is this one unified communications product. And as a result, we've learned a lot over the years from our customers, and I think we've positioned ourselves in the enterprise fairly well. So where we're going to fit into this now is what we want to look at. And first, let's look at what we're actually facing out there as an enterprise customer. So the first thing you notice is this is kind of one of the two architectures that Microsoft is talking about leaving behind. And this is where the customer has on their premise their PBX phone system. And this could be an older version of a phone system, or like I said, a brand new voice over IP phone system. But it's an enterprise phone system. And through the use of a SIP connector of some type, most people with a media gateway of some type, going out through their firewall, across the internet, and into Microsoft land. And before it can actually connect to the Exchange server, it goes through a specific session border controller that Microsoft hosts within their cloud. And so this is the architecture today that people are using. A phone call rings in, rings to user A at their desk, doesn't get answered, forwards across that SIP trunk through the media gateway, out through the data connection, through that SBC, and it's actually answered by the Microsoft Exchange server. And that call is actually taking up bandwidth now for the entire duration as that user listens to all the greetings and leaves the messages. The other way to accomplish the same thing is for a certain subset of PBXs. They actually engineered SIP trunks so they didn't need a gateway. They basically made their SIP trunks conform to what Microsoft needed to see. So there's still a gateway and firewalls and things like that, but it's really a direct SIP connection into the Exchange server out in the cloud. And as I said, for whatever reason, Microsoft decided they don't want to support this anymore. And they have various different descriptions of what the problem is, having a third-party, gateway in their enterprise out there things. It really doesn't matter at this point. They've just said, no, this is going away. So what you need to do is find another way to do business within that 11 months, which I'm guessing is probably down to something like 7 months now. But the challenge here is if you can't connect directly, if you can't connect your PBX directly, what are you going to do? And there's a couple of different architectures you can start investigating. Some of them are brand new, in response to this. Some manufacturers came out with either new products or versions of their product that they said would help with this, and they're kind of untested, and you might get to be the first one to try one. And then there's some other solutions that Microsoft really downplays, but that make pretty good sense in terms of giving the enterprise or letting them maintain the experience they had before, minimum disruption, and still keep all the various pieces of equipment in their enterprise that they wanted to. So when Microsoft lists out the options, the two in gray are kind of what Microsoft sees as their preferred option. Option one, they say, yeah, just throw everything away and move to the cloud. And they, of course, would love you to do that. And, effectively, that kind of complete migration to the cloud for your phone system and everything else in even 11 months would have been difficult to do, and in the 7 months that's left, it just doesn't make sense. On top of which, the Cloud PBX just isn't ready for prime time. There's not going to be a single enterprise customer that looks at that Cloud PBX and says, oh yeah, that's everything I need. There will be major communications functions not available, and not only do they don't make them for the Cloud PBX yet, but they don't really have APIs yet. So whereas Skype was missing a lot of things from the communications point of view, their APIs allowed third-party vendors to fill in that kind of missing application space. With option one in the Cloud PBX, not going to happen. Basically, if you need more than the most rudimentary automated attendant, then you're not going to be able to take option one. Option two is kind of the same Microsoft version, kind of half-stepping it, saying, okay, then take out your PBX at your enterprise and put in our PBX. Go ahead and put in Skype for Business Enterprise Voice on-prem. And then that can still connect up to Exchange online. They'll accept the connections from their own phone system, from Skype, but not from any third-party phone system. And this one, again, is not a trivial thing for someone to do. First of all, the cost implication is fairly serious, the ongoing licensing piece, but also the migration. And even though Skype for Enterprise has a much better set of applications available through the third-party vendors, it is not necessarily the complete solution that everyone would look for as well. So in a very good-natured manner, I suppose, Microsoft did spell out a few options that you can look at using other people's equipment. And option three, they say, well, you know what you can do is you can go get a gateway, some sort of media gateway that connects to Skype, and put a Skype Enterprise server in. Just don't deploy it for your users. And then you can connect the Enterprise gateway to the Skype server, and then the Skype server will go through. And while that sounds interesting, what that really means is you now have to buy all the licensing for everyone as if you're deploying Skype Enterprise Voice. And you have to program up servers. You just aren't going to actually use it. So that makes probably the most expensive gateway product you could buy for any function at all. And then option four, they sort of really downplay and say, well, you can just get another voicemail system. And that's actually the one that probably comes closest to meeting most people's needs. And that's definitely the camp that we fall into. So we're going to spend a little time looking at two of these options at least. Option one and option two, not much to say about them. If you're willing to do a rip and replace and you're comfortable with the money and the time frame, then maybe that's what you'll want to do. But what we found is, unified messaging, even if we were looking at a new customer going in who's trying to decide between Exchange, unified messaging, and ours, Exchange is not a very powerful unified messaging tool. It doesn't really have many features added to it over the years. It doesn't really compete. So if nothing else, you should probably get an idea of what's out there in the unified messaging world, because if you're going to leave Exchange UM, that's probably not a bad thing for you. As you'll see, we aren't really going to be able to talk about all of our unified messaging features. That's not what this webinar is about. But I think you'll find there's an awful lot that we can add to the picture if we do end up being involved in this main piece, which is the infrastructure replacement. So when we look at unified messaging, and keep in mind we've been doing this longer than anyone else. We were the first on the market with unified messaging years ago. We've been doing unified messaging where we connect to Exchange Online since 2011. We have thousands of customers already doing this. We're the one option on that option list that's not new. This is something we've been doing for years. We can sit down and talk to you about it. We can give you references to talk about. We have all the right answers because we've been doing this for that long. And we have all the features that anybody's going to need in the unified messaging world. So if we take and look at kind of our option, what we say is go with the option 4, replacement piece, I guess, and go ahead and put a CX enterprise system in your enterprise connected to your phone system. So step 1, we connect every phone system out there. So no matter what you have, we're going to be able to go ahead and put a CXE in for you. And by the way, if you know you are going to change that phone system out in a year, you just can't do it quick enough, CXE is going to work with your new phone system too. So you could have an old Avaya system, and we can connect to that. And then next year, when you either bring that up to voice over IP or move to a hosted system, no matter what, you'll be able to continue to use our product. So now the way this works is call calls in, rings on user A, doesn't get answered, forwards to the CXE server on site. The entire conversation takes place on site. We answer the call, we play the greeting, we record the message. And then the message gets moved to the Exchange server. The actual call doesn't go across the network. So from a bandwidth point of view, we're using very little bandwidth compared to all the other solutions that use at least as much as you have now. And some of them use considerably more. So if you look at kind of the advantage here, with a media gateway of some type and the Skype server on site, with all the costs involved in deploying that, the way that works is the way your system works today. The call forwards across that bandwidth and goes in and is answered by the Exchange server. And that entire telephone call is using bandwidth, which if you already have this in place, you're already doing. But you also know things like if that data connection goes down, your phones go ring no answer on site. So it's not the most reliable of solutions for voice communications. We're going to do it differently. In the sense is the entire communications with the caller happens on site. All we do is use that data connection to move the message, let's say 300K, up and put it into the Exchange server. It's still in that Exchange server, just like just like Exchange is working for you today. It's in that inbox. You look at it, you see it. It's got got all the same attributes that you're used to, but only the message got moved. And we've actually gone so far over the years as to do a cache on our physical server in the enterprise, where we keep copies of the raw media of the messages in a first in, first out buffer, maybe 30 days worth of messages in there. It just depends. And if a caller calls in and says, I want to play my message, CXE goes to the Exchange server, brings back that file name, looks in the cache, and if we have that still in the cache, which in most cases we will, we'll play it from the CXE server, even further reducing the drain on the network and the drain on the Exchange server. So we're actually going to reduce the data network even further than anyone else is going to do, just because of the use of that cache. So if you do go ahead, there's things that you're going to get when you go with the AVST option. Our option's scalable and secure. It has a lot of features, and we could talk about other features later. It is important to know it does integrate with anything out there today in the way of a PBX. We have worked with Microsoft. When they knew this was coming, they worked with a few vendors and basically allowed us to use the unique message class that they use when we put the messages into Exchange. And what that gives you is the same look and feel. You will now see the messages in Exchange looking exactly the same way. You'll open the message and see the Microsoft Exchange form that you're used to. You can play the message through the PC exactly the same. There are a few small differences when you do this, but the bulk of seeing messages, playing messages, forwarding messages, that experience won't even change for your users. What will change is the PBX, through the PBX functionality. So when you call in to get your messages, that will be a different user interface. We have an alternate TUI that's very close, but it will be slightly different. We also have a speech interface, just like Microsoft does. So, I mean, the experience will change somewhat over the phone, but not that much. Setting up your mailbox, recording your personal greetings, things like that will change a little bit. Message waiting will continue to be the same. Outcall, SMS, all of that functionality you'll continue to have just like before. So, as a kind of first ditch, use this to move across, and let's not impact the organization. It's a very good choice. Later, you might want to look at all the other features that are available on the CXE that weren't available on the UM Exchange. Much better automated attendant, both speech and DTMF based. A nice call center product. If you're using some sort of call center product now, this probably isn't to replace it, but for smaller informal call centers, it's a very inexpensive thing you might want to add. So there's just a lot of pieces out there. Now, some people are kind of saying, well, I see Skype as an alternative down the road, but I can't do it in this short time frame. And in that case, if you went with CX, when you do decide to look at Skype, we are the only other voice messaging product that integrates with Skype for Business. No one else can do that. So you could go in, and then next year, if your budget has it in it, you could move to Skype Enterprise, and you could go ahead and continue to use your AVST product, your CXE product. And we do this because we have worked with Microsoft probably closer than anyone else in the last few years. And we're very close physically, which helps a little bit. They're in Redmond, and we're 10 miles from there, probably in the Seattle area. And we're a double gold partner, which is extremely rare. But when we started with Microsoft, we said, well, what do we need so that when we talk to you, you're comfortable with us? And they said, well, you need to get certifications in communications, which is basically the voice side, the telephone side from a Microsoft point of view, and messaging, which is basically the exchange side. So we've done that. We maintain the certifications through a number of our employees being certified, and we are now designated as a XX Gold partner, which basically means Microsoft works with us very easily. That's probably one of the reasons, that they involved us early on with them using the same message class over and pieces like that. So if you do end up going in that direction, then this wouldn't be anything that you wouldn't be wasting any money. Whereas if you go with any other product, when you go with Skype, you'll probably be replacing your voicemail product again. So if we look at, what the enterprises are facing, besides the time crunch, there's also the money crunch. Nothing like somebody throwing a major infrastructure change into your budget at the last minute. You probably don't have an emergency fund for this kind of stuff sitting out there. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the pricing structure a bit on this product for those people to help them out. So we have a very aggressive pricing structure that has to do with and this is only for people who are doing this, who are going, to replace the Exchange Online connection. And based on the maintenance costs and things like that, I think you will find it as extremely appealing. There'll still be a cost, and no one likes a sudden cost like that. But I believe that our option will have the least negative impact on the enterprise because we can be so close to what you already have. You'll end up with the most reliable solution where we'll actually reduce the reliance on the data network to keep all the other pieces going. And as a future, you can sit down and talk with us about all the other things our platform does, which it's a pretty impressive platform. So that lends us to some time for questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Neil. Okay, we do have a few questions already in the queue. If you haven't submitted a question yet and you would like to, use the orange arrow in the upper right corner to expand the options, and you should see the question box toward the bottom. Neil, first question, can a Microsoft customer continue to use SBC without support?
No, because that's their SBC and Microsoft will be turning it off. So unfortunately not.
Okay. Next, do you have a detailed feature comparison between Exchange and AVST?
Yes, we do. And you just write that down, I'll make sure we get back to it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Okay, another one. Exchange UM has a play on phone feature that rings the user's phone and plays the message through the phone. This is popular with users who don't have PC speakers or headsets. Does AVST have a similar feature?
So this is where we get into one of the complex pieces of deciding which form you want to use. If you decide to retain the Exchange online form, then the Play on Phone feature won't be there. But we also have our own form that is actually a little more powerful than the Exchange online form. If you deploy that instead, you'll still have the Play on PC, you'll still have the Play on Phone, you'll have the ability to change back and forth between them, when you're listening to messages, right in the middle of a message if you want. And you'll have some other things like dialers built in to place return calls to the caller and things like that. So at no additional cost, you can deploy our unified messaging form and maintain that functionality.
Okay, thanks. There's a question about getting a copy of the slides. Just as a reminder there, we will send an email to you later today that will include a link to download the slides as well as a link to this recording. And they're also in the handouts area, which is near the question box. You can download it from there as well. Another question is speech to text done by AVST, and is it more accurate than UM?
So it's definitely more accurate than UM. On our system, it's an option. We actually have a couple of different options for it, both of which are more accurate. It will be slightly different depending on the time frame when this goes in. What we do is send a separate email that has the transcription in it. And we're using two different companies for services right now that do that. One actually offers an on-site transcription service. So if you have security issues, you need it done on site, we can do that. And that's actually done by Mutari, and Mutari is recognized as one of the most accurate ones out there. And then we also have an option to do it hosted that's a little less expensive, but does involve moving the message out to the cloud and back again. And we're happy to discuss either or both of those options with you.
Thanks, Neil. Okay, there's a question about whether the solution is HIPAA compliant. I'm not sure if you want to comment on that or if we should take that one offline.
No, I can. That's easy to comment on. HIPAA compliant is not like a checkbox you get with something in the messaging field. You could have messages that have content that people would not want to get off the site. If you're storing your messages in Exchange, you're probably not, your voice messages today, you're probably not HIPAA compliant, because anybody can take that voice message, and let's say I work at the nurse's desk and I get something that has confidential patient information in a voicemail. There's nothing stopping me from sending it off the system. So HIPAA compliance, anytime you store voice messages in an email server, is pretty hard to really talk about with a straight face. What we do have is something called secure messaging. So for those users within a healthcare deployment that might have confidential information, we don't put the messages into Exchange. We leave them on our server, and those people can access those messages either through our secure web client or through our secure mobile client. We can, if you really have to store messages in Exchange, we can mark the messages private, and in that case we can set the system up so when you receive the private message, it doesn't actually hold the message. It says, you have a private message, here's the number you have to call to get that message. So there are things we can do. But if you're going to just blindly store voice messages in the user's inbox, then HIPAA compliance is pretty much out the window.
Okay. Another feature question, it looks like. Default user interface for UM is voice command where the user controls the voicemail menu by speaking. Is there something similar in AVST?
Yes, we have a speech interface as well. It's optional. We would talk about whether you want to deploy it. If you're using the OVA or the speech interface, then yes, we have it. It's been around a lot longer. It does actually quite a bit more in terms of, besides just messages, you can use it for a very high-powered call screening and making outgoing calls and things like that. We'd be happy to have that discussion with anybody.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we can go ahead and wrap up. I'm just doing a quick scroll through the questions. It looks like we got to most, if not all of them, and we'll, of course, we do circulate these internally to follow up with each person who asks questions to make sure after the webinar that we answered it appropriately and that there's no follow-on questions. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Look for, as I mentioned, look for an email from us later today with a slides link, a link to the slides for download as well as the recording. And I'll let Neil also give his quick goodbye.
Thank you. We do appreciate everyone coming by on these. As I said, these are for you guys. So any kind of feedback that you would give us would be great. You can send us anything you'd like to info@avst.com. and tell us if these webinars are too long, too short, maybe different subjects you'd like to see us cover. We really do respond to that feedback. So thank you, everybody, and have a good day.
To learn more about AVST, please visit www.avst.com.